Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. People, despite having maybe more opportunities and resources at their disposal than at any time in human history, are still experiencing depression, loneliness, and sadness at epidemic levels. It's critical that we understand how to get up, reach high, and strive towards the finish line over and over again, because life will not stop knocking us down. Raised in inner city Philadelphia in a home with a loving mother and an abusive stepfather, our next guest experienced the hard life, the cons, and the law of the streets as a law-breaking, rabble-rousing, car-thieving, home robber, nothing more than a common thug. But when he heard the gospel, heard that Christ's death and resurrection was for him, he surrendered control of his life to God, who transformed him. Nothing has been the same since. S. Todd Townsend, Senior, Ph.D., and Doctor of Education, is the Senior Pastor of the Resurrection Center in Wilmington, Delaware, along with his wife and co-pastor, Dr. Cleo Vilna Townsend. A preacher, teacher, lecturer, and conference speaker, as well as a cross-cultural and cross-denominational ministry consultant. He's also a rap artist and songwriter. Here to talk about his new book, Getting Up from Being Down, Stand Up, Reach High, Finish Strong, is Todd Townsend. Todd, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Well, Rabbi, it's good to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to be with you, a fellow Pennsylvania native. I came from the other side, from the western Pennsylvania side, and actually people don't really realize how different you and I are in our upbringing. Pittsburgh's more of a Midwest, more Midwestern kind of city, and Philadelphia is more Mid-Atlantic, kind of a different attitude. Two different worlds, same state, but two completely different worlds, except in the Jewish community, we're the same. But in other communities, you know, we had, I grew up in the 50s and 60s and saw a different side of Pittsburgh's identity. We were a Catholic city, and a lot of anti-Semitism came out of the Catholic community, more so than some of the racial divides that you saw in the streets of Philadelphia. There was, you know, I don't remember, and probably because I was isolated, as most Jewish kids were, the ghetto wasn't something that we were familiar with. It's not something where you didn't go shopping there. That's not where you went to get your new shoes. It wasn't where you went. You didn't go there. It wasn't a destination on the bus tour. When you toured the city on the Gray Line tour, they didn't take you to the inner city where things were contending with your soul and things that were kind of going on in your life. You talk about growing up in a home with a loving mother and an abusive stepfather. And that's a recipe for a young man to be looking for his own chops, his own identity. Mom is loved, revered, respected, and yet she's married to a guy that doesn't meet your standard. You don't like him, and it sounds to me he didn't like you.
Yeah, well, number one, they weren't married, so there was no covenant, no bond, which probably gave occasion and opportunity for less lawless, or I should say more lawlessness. But no, it's actually a conflict. I loved him because he was my father figure. He was present. He was in the house on a regular basis. In the absence of any other male role models, the one that's present influences you. So it's a love-hate relationship because I hated his behavior. I hated the abuse. I hated the anger, the spontaneous combustion, the irrational explosions, It didn't take much for him to go over the edge and begin pummeling my mom. We would go from eating dinner to a dramatic, I won't call it a brawl because it was abuse. It was absolute abuse. She never had the upper hand in the physical exchange. So yeah, it was a love-hate relationship. And that's the kind of vortex that I was trapped in, a love-hate context. Abusive stepfather who dealt drugs from our home, uh, a community where there's pain and conflict in the street, uh, peers and peer pressure to do wrong, where the attraction wasn't to go to the amusement park, but who should we rob, or what's the next store to take something from. So yeah.
The street, if you will, what years are we talking about?
Um, so in West Philadelphia, we went to New Jersey when I was 12. I was born in '63. So we're talking about the '70s, that realm of time primarily. And our transformation to New Jersey didn't last long because he was a part of that. And in order to get away from him, we actually had to go to California. We ran to California. I mean, my mom literally jumped out of moving cars and things of that nature. So there were some extreme moments, and we had to go to California to get away from him. And when we came back to Jersey, he had sold everything in the house because everything was in her name. And so consequently, we moved back to Philly. Wisely, she never sold the house, she rented it out. So we wound up back in Philadelphia.
So you're back in Philadelphia, and you're at a time when the voice of the African American community was more radical. It was becoming even more of a, I remember late 60s, early 70s, White Panthers, Black Panthers, Eldridge Cleaver, books Black Like Me, just a whole new identity of you had this, my generation of we were colorblind. We saw no racial divide. We were make love, not war. I dated Angela Davis's cousin. So here I was, a Jewish kid from Pittsburgh, dating Angela Davis's cousin from Vermont, and that would be, in that day, that was unheard of. That was the very first appearance of mixed white and black relationships, where a white guy might date a black girl might, and it was
Taboo.
it crossed, and a Jewish. To add to it, it's like the worst nightmare a Jewish mother could have was that her son would bring his black girlfriend home for the Jewish holidays. And so there's all kinds of social dynamics going on. And then you have this affirmative action and this trying to enhance racial relations, but by doing it in such a way that you put it under such an intense spotlight that what it does was it left almost a burning image, where it created more of a divide. There were so many better ways of, we look back on sociologically, so many better ways to have done it than to isolate and say we're going to give preferential treatment to this community over this community because of history, and it brought about more negative feelings and more divisive groups came out of it. So not only did you have out of the African American community a rising up of a more militant presence, you also had out of the white community a more aggressive anti black agenda. So it was a recipe for disaster and an opportunity for somebody who, if they didn't have a good home life, there was a vortex out there to suck you in, to offer you brotherhood, to offer you identity, to offer you a sense of belonging, a new definition of family. And now all of a sudden you had people that were going to look out for you. Now you had a brotherhood that was going to circle around you and protect you. But you and I both know that the truth of that was false.
Yeah, you described the era well, and it's good to hear it from a Jewish perspective. You're right. There's a power struggle. There's a clash. There's a cultural divide, and there is this emergence of Black Power, and the '70s culture, the hippie freedom, and on top of that, you have frustration that occurs in the Black household because of demographic and financial limitations, institutional lockout. And yeah, that pressure, that tension then is translated so that there's no power to express it against the dominant culture, so that frustration rolls down instead of up. And that consequently creates a young generation where homes are filled with tension, and then you've got a generational divide. So yeah, the street life becomes attractive, but the street life isn't really a solution. It kind of becomes a womb, um, a place to cultivate another generation's negative activity. And that's what I think, yeah, I was in. I was a part of that culture, part of the survival mentality, lack of opportunity, but I need money. We're teenagers and we want to buy this and we want to buy that. And there's the natural teenage rebellion against home and whatever else. So, yeah, I think it's a great explanation, and we fall into a community of camaraderie. But that camaraderie, much like the book of Proverbs, chapter 10, talks about, do not align yourself with this body of people who say, let us shed blood, let us go in the night, let us take from the innocent. And so, yeah, that describes, as a matter of fact, the book of Proverbs, when I got saved, when I gave my life to Christ and began reading it, I was like, whoa, this is a commentary on my life. And it was one of the striking moments that made me fall in love with the scriptures.
Well, it's so interesting, and I will make this statement, is that the same message is being peddled on the streets of America today. It's being peddled in the prison system today, but it's under the covering of Islam as the message of the new brotherhood and of the new belonging and of exactly what you're talking about, because wherever there's an authentic, Satan's always going to rise up a counterfeit. And the street brotherhood was the counterfeit. Now we have Islam in offering a same brotherhood, a same belonging, a message that resonates with the disenfranchised, that says, I now can belong to something bigger than myself. And so that's why we have, in the prison system, we have this great fierce battle for the souls of the incarcerated, and two truly warring factions of the authenticity of the gospel and the counterfeit of this message of Islam. And we're seeing both take hold, but it really is, if we're going to look at this new aggregated street, because the street hasn't changed. It's moved a little bit, and it's figured a couple things out, but it has not changed in 40 years, and the message hasn't changed in 40 years.
The street has sophisticated itself, because you're talking about street behavior. What would have been classified as ghetto behavior is now common in suburban and upper class neighborhoods as well. So it's sophisticated itself. And you're right. That same common family draw is true of the Aryans, the skinheads, the Nazi Party. That piece is that flood, that river of evil that finds its place in cultural norms.
Right.
And even when the church, quite frankly, if not careful, can become a vehicle for similar mentality. So yeah, it's something we fight against in our soul, and I think it's one of the benefits of clinging to the promises of Scripture. For me, getting up from being down, standing up is a first step, and reaching high is a pattern for living and the opportunity to finish well. Little by little, not all in one shot. We don't go for the Hail Mary occasionally, but for the most part, let's gain 10 yards, let's gain another 20, let's gain two, and let's continue to score.
You know, that's it. We've got to move the ball down the field,
Yeah.
but we're also going to lose some yards. We're going to gain some
Yeah.
yards, and the whole thing is we've got 100 yards. We know the distance. We've got to run the race. You know, forgetting what's behind. Okay, it's that guy right behind me that's just about to get me. But you know, this I do. I forget what's behind, but I press on to the mark of the prize in the high calling of Messiah. So, how does the gospel reach you?
Well, what happens is I'm frustrated. I've got a car. I've got a 9 to 5 job downtown Philadelphia. I've got the life of a single man, and yet I'm frustrated. There's too much missing, and I'm not sure what it is. So I seek out a family member, and that family member suggests that I go to church with them. But at that event, I meet a family member I've never met before, and that family member redirects me and says, "Listen, I hear you. I wouldn't recommend this church. It's kind of traditional. I'm not sure you know what that means because, I can see that you're not really from a church background." And we didn't go to church.
Right.
So her recommendation was this other church. And here's the phrase she used. She said, "And the reason I recommend that is because the pastor is an ex-gangster like you." And I was a little insulted because I just met this woman, but in hindsight, I can't deny that she really saw through the true me. And the advice was divine because I actually went to that church, and that Sunday morning, the preacher preached such a message that in my ignorance of providence, I began to wonder who told him I was coming. I actually began to believe somebody informed him that I was coming, and he restructured his whole message on my behalf later to find out that was just God identifying and loving me. But it was that Sunday after service that I gave my life to Christ. And that began the journey. That began the process of getting up, getting out of the vortex, out of the mentality, discovering the scriptures, much like, wow, and in the world, unsaved in my arrogance, things like, well, if a tree falls in the wilderness, does it make a sound? And that's really like a deep thought, and you're really being profound. And then you get saved and you read the scriptures, and you're like, first of all, the answer is yes, a tree makes a sound, whether anybody hears it or not. So let's just get that off the table. And we begin to move into the wisdom of scripture, which says, you must be born again, and old things must be passed away, and grow in the grace and knowledge of Jesus Christ. And the new man, the new creature, has the power to overcome the old creature. Well, how do we do that? Well, that's a process of growth. That's uh, walking in faith, learning of Christ. And so I began that journey. And systematically, God began to dismantle my pain, my anger, my frustration, my bitterness, and replace it with real moments of joy, authentic relationship. Um, Spiritual fathers, parents who were more effective, caring, and loving in 2 weeks than I'd experienced my whole life. And so he whet my appetite to salvation and its benefits.
You know, it's interesting. Did you feel like the pastor was watching you the whole time?
it certainly felt, it was amazing. And her direction was profound because I got there and he was dressed well. He had on a suit, dressed really well, and he spoke really well. But he was also street sensitive. And when he spoke about the scriptures or he spoke about life's process, he spoke in a way that let me know he understood my lifestyle, meaning he possibly had come out of the same rut, but look at him now. And that got my attention. And it made me respect him. And then God gave me a relationship with him, and I became one of his disciples. And I got to see that he actually did see where I had been and where I could go, which was probably the most motivational thing that occurred is that he had hope for my future when I didn't understand how to hope about the future.
So you were going through the motions of life, and you were making it, but in some ways you were faking it because there wasn't real fullness of joy. There was you could get the money for a car, you could get the money for clothes, you could get the money, you could get the job, you could do these things. But as far as being nurtured, being nourished, being fed, being loved, being embraced, belonging, you were no longer on the outside looking to break your way in by doing whatever it was that they said you had to do to make your way in. You now had somebody that paid your way, that already picked up the tab for you, had already given and made a sacrifice, but they made that sacrifice for you specifically, and you heard that message. You didn't hear the message that Jesus died for the sins of the world. You heard the message that Jesus died for your sins so that you could have life and live it more abundantly. You see, I had the same experience, but I was 44 years old coming out of the synagogue. So the synagogues is just as much of a ghetto as the street is. That, we have our ways and our traditions, and everybody else is an outsider. And if you don't do it our way, then you just don't. You don't know. You don't eat what we eat. You don't talk the way we talk. You don't dance the way we dance. You don't celebrate the way we celebrate. So you're different. You're outside. You're somebody else. You're from another place. And I heard the message in a Messianic synagogue, and I called him my Velvet Elvis. You ever seen one of those Velvet Elvis pictures, where it looks like the eyes are following you no matter where you are? It's always looking at you. Right. So that was the minister ministering the day that I walked in. He was a Velvet Elvis to me. I thought he had his eyes. I thought I was the only person in the whole place, and he was just talking to me. And what I came to find out was the truth is he knew everybody else.
Exactly.
He knew I wasn't saved. So he was just talking to me because he knew everybody else in there was small enough, 250 people. He knew. So he never took his eyes off of me because he knew that I needed to hear what it was he was saying the same way you needed to hear. We're talking with Todd Townsend, Dr. Todd Townsend. Actually, it's Dr. So it would be Dr. or it would be Reverend Dr. Mr. The Reverend Mr. Dr. Todd Townsend.
He's referencing the two doctors.
Author of the new book, Getting Up from Being Down, Stand Up, Reach High, Finish Strong. He says your next significant upsurge in life awaits you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how do you stand up? How do you get back up when life keeps knocking you down? How do you break through and reach high? All right, because this is as high as I can reach. That's it. That's as high as I can go. But if I know that I only have to go that high, there's a hand waiting to pull me the rest of the way, I'm going to continue to reach that high to grab a hold of it so that I can finish strong. And it's where you wind up. It's your eternal destination that Todd's concerned about. Your current condition doesn't matter to him one little bit. And if he steps on your toes, he's just going to tell you move your feet because he's going to keep on coming right? Because He cares about where you eternally are going to spend the rest of your life. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Todd Townsend, author of Getting Up from Being Down, Stand Up, Reach High, Finish Strong. Todd, welcome back to the program.
Good to be back with you, Rabbi.
Todd, this is a beautiful picture of God's redemptive plan to take somebody out of one world and have them born into a new world where they are completely a babe. Naked I came into this world, naked I shall leave it. And so you come to faith in Jesus and you give him your all in all, but you have absolutely no clue whatsoever, just like I had no clue whatsoever, no idea, that not only did my soul have to get saved, my mouth had to get saved, my brain had to get saved, my wallet had to get saved, every part of me had to get saved, that I had to die to everything that I ever thought, I ever said, I ever believed. I had to set it all aside and take on a whole new life, and that's what happened with you. But you actually did something which I commend you for, and that is you came along and you brought others with you by reaching them not just with the straight gospel, but through music. and
Yes.
you took that gifting and you said, I can preach a good message, uh, apologetics, homiletics, hermeneutics, all that stuff. People don't have any clue what we're talking about. All right. But I can also get them where they live. And if I
Yes.
can get them where they live, all right, because I can't walk into every home, I can't walk into every street corner, all right, and they're not every, if I build it, and I build it in Delaware, and they're not coming from the streets of Philadelphia, how do I get to them? And I have to get to them at multiple channels, multiple levels, okay? But the message is the same,
Yes.
but the mode of transportation, the destination, the same mode of transportation is different. So you found yourself with a new identity.
Yeah.
And in this new identity, you also found out things about yourself that made you want to become more like the Messiah, more conformed to his image. So you went on, you got an education, you studied, and this became your calling, not your job. So you quit your job
Hmm.
to answer your call,
Yes.
all right, which is a very different concept than the world looks at. Okay? Is you quit your job to answer your call. Well, wait a second. Well, I thought you were a pastor. That's your job. No, that's your calling.
That's a
Okay,
calling.
you used to have a job.
Right.
Now you have a calling. So you're talking to people who are in a fatherless home, or the father is not their father. He's an angry stepfather. Well, that sounds familiar.
Yes.
He has fits of rage. He's dealing drugs. He's got his own gang thing going on, and you want to reach them with this message that they can get up from being down, but don't get comfortable because you're going to get knocked down again.
So,
How does that play out?
well, first of all, it's the nature of life. So we begin the book with a story. Uh, I heard it from a preacher, and it resonated with me. So the preacher tells a story of a child taking their first steps. And you know, for everybody, that's exciting. We pull the cameras out, we start texting, and we take pictures, and there's a great celebration. But we really know that 2, 3 steps in, what's going to happen? The child's going to fall down. And so the preacher modifies the story and says, what if the child could talk? And said something like, oh, mom and dad, that's it. I just can't walk. And you know, that would be tragic. But that's not reality. We know that despite the fall, the child's going to get up again. And so the metaphor for life is illustrated right there, because we've got to get back up every day. We've got to get back up after a difficulty. We've got to get back up after we succeed. We've got to get up again. And if you fall down, if you trip in the middle of the day in Center City, and you just stay there, that's abnormal. It's going to feel abnormal. It's going to look abnormal, because instinctively we're journey mandated to get up again. And so for me, number one, it's a life process. Getting up from being down is required of us every day. And so I just use the language. It's also a great metaphor for the resurrection, which is Christ getting up from the dead, which is the ultimate pit or fall. And yet he gets up despite surmountable odds. So that being the case, as you said, God made me a pastor. I didn't want to be a pastor. I was happy being an usher, actually. But little by little, God unfolds your call. And so how do I now transfer this? I'm enjoying it. He's changing my life. I'm redeemed. I'm thinking different. I feel different about my enemies. I want to pray for them. I'm learning that those in scripture who obey God are favored. Opportunity comes, but then they're entrusted. And so now, how do I transfer this message? Well, I go to school. And in going to school, I associate with populations of different cultures, Jews, Asians, whites, and I study the scriptures. And we all come to the same conclusion that Jesus is Lord and we need him. And that affects my thinking profoundly. And so I realize I'm called to affect my culture. Paul says, I'm the son of a Benjamite. I'm the redemptive family of God. I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. I know the law like the back of my hand. So he has a great deal of honor in his culture. And then he says, but I count it all dung for the excellency of Christ. Whoa. Okay. So Christ is preeminent. But how do we help other people? So I want to empower the people. So that means that I have to become all things to all men. And so I'm not just a preacher. I'm a communicator of the gospel. And communication is done through music, written form, articulation, drama, sign language. And so it opens the ceiling. And then it's simply a prayer, Lord, help me. And that's where music comes into play. Speaking the contemporary language of young people and using hip hop, which is a cultural norm for me, as a vehicle to express both pain or joy. So what hip hop does, now I didn't plan this. I didn't even know I could do it. I wrote some rhymes to a beat, and my musicians played for very famous people, and they heard it, and they said, hey, this is pretty good, come into the studio. And I said, no, stop playing with me. And they said, no. So I'll give you an example. I grew up kind of chilly in a city called Philly. Pain-filled, bad start, angry head, cold heart. Trained up under a broke umbrella. Step pops was a raging bull, that kind of fella, I'm sad to say. He hurt my mom and he broke my spirit. Over time, before I knew it, I was in the crime. But I can't blame him, sin was mine. Wisdom spoken, I wouldn't hear it. Consequences, I didn't fear it. Credit bad and I couldn't clear it. Crash course dummy in the driver's seat. Yeah, that was me. Crash course dummy in the driver's seat. Running streets, I was dirty deep like Judas living for a 30-piece. Was about to die, but I couldn't see. Now I'm thanking God for that APB. He broke me down with a water hose. That holy water broke through my clothes. Fire hydrant, push it through. Living waters, make it new. Blood red water washed away every stain. Blood red water washed away every flaw. Mercy hopped all over me like kangaroo paws. I'm changed. I'm clean. Water. And so what happens is now we can preach the gospel, we teach the gospel, we do conferences, we're writing, but we're also communicating via hip hop.
And this is drawing people in. See, this is what we miss. We take a critical attitude of a generation, we condemn the generation, we label the generation, and we talk to or talk at the generation. And so we say, you need what I have. I don't need what you have. I drive a nicer car than you do. I got more power surrounding me right now than I got. You got a congregation of 500. I got a congregation of 20,000 people that are depending on my network.
Yep.
Right here of distribution.
Yep.
But the difference is that it's a reflection. And we're called to be a reflection.
Yes.
So when Jesus is sitting there 12 years old in the middle of the rabbis, he's talking rabbi talk. He's not talking a different language, and they're not talking a different language to him. And when he comes back in the fullness of his ministry, and remember, 30 years of preparation for 3.5 years of ministry. 30 years of preparation for 3.5 years of ministry.
Now, I wrote about that because for me, that comes up often. So we think about a Western perspective. All right, guys, here's the deal. We're going to go to college for 4 years. By the way, you're going to come away with about $70,000 worth of debt. We'll deal with that later. But we're going to go to college for 4 years, and now you're equipped for 30 years of life. And my argument is no. No, you're not. And let's use the contrast. So Jesus takes 33 years to prepare to do 3 years of work. And when he says to Telestai, it is finished, what he has completed lasts to this day. As a matter of fact, the success of his work is still giving other people work. But the principle is, if you take Moses, all right, what happens? Well, he gets his call at 80 years old. 40 years preparation in Egypt. He's the son of Pharaoh. He's got academic training. He's got military training. He's got political training. He's got mathematics, science, philosophy, and leadership. And then the incident occurs, and he winds up 40 years in the wilderness. So he gets the secular education, then he gets the sacred education, and then God says, Moses, Moses. Whoa. 40 years, 40 years, 80 years of prep, and then he gets his call. Joseph, he grows up in a godly home, and he's shaped in the ways of Judaism. And then he winds up in Babylon, and they study. I'm sorry, Joseph winds up in Egypt. And again, you have preparation before the call. Daniel, same thing. Godly home, trained up in Babylon in the laws of the Chaldeans. And look at how God gets mileage out of their lives. And so it's not just our gifts, it's the preparation. I think the gifts are God-given. School is a tool that sharpens them. Experience is a tool that sharpens them. And so for me, that's what became a definition. 1 foot on the front line. Because when I discovered the Philadelphia College Bible, and I went down there and took a couple Bible classes, I went back to my pastor and I said, I'm going to move on campus. He said, no. He said, don't move on campus. He said, stay in the community and let's do frontline ministry work. And then go to school at the same time. So I had the theory plus the pragmatism. And I'm being redeemed as a process by God from my old life into my new life. And so the question becomes, how do I transfer that to other people? How do I, because that's salvation. I'm saved, but now I'm being saved by growing in the Lord. And so that's where the book comes from. I'm trying to help people get up from being down and engage the process of maturation, one step, one victory at a time.
You know, what's so interesting is the harder a ball hits, the higher it bounces.
Yes.
So, you know, if you have no air in your ball, you just splat. Okay? And you've got to pump it back. You got to pump it back up, okay, before it's able to be used again, before it can even bounce again. Most people look at their circumstance and curse the obstacle. When you and I look at the obstacle, we say, "Praise the Lord," because now I get to apply everything that He's taught me, and my blessing is on the other side of that obstacle. So I'm not going to curse that obstacle. I'm going to bless, and I'm not going to ask the question, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? Okay. No, God wants to know, wants you to find out, what do I get out of this? What can I get out of this? Am I going to get stronger? Am I going to be able to be more resilient? Am I going to be able to take on the pressure? Are you preparing me? 25 years from the 17-year-old Joseph, 17 years old, given a dream, okay, till we get to Genesis 50, when the dream is fulfilled. Right. In those 25 years, from 17 to 42, in those 25 years, the only thing Joseph did was marinate.
Marinate. That's a great way to put it. That's
all he did was marinate.
That's a great way to put it.
He did not touch the dream. He did not speak of the dream. As a matter of fact, when you look at the narrative about Joseph, you don't even hear anything about his sin life mentioned. Never referred to. He's not referred to as a sinless man. It's just that none of his sin was ever brought out in the text. Right. He marinated for 25 years. He didn't ask every day, is today the day that everybody's going to bow down to me? Is today the day that I'm going to be crowned? He had no idea, because if God gives you the dream, God's responsible for fulfilling the dream. You're just supposed to marinate. You're just supposed to be where you're supposed to be, right, to grow where He plants you, so that you can be equipped for the day He calls you. And when He calls you, your only response can be, Hineni, here am I.
He's the potter, we're the clay.
Joseph's
story is profound. And what I love about it, God gives a boy a vision. Manhood manifests the vision. And the journey between the two it's almost the invisible feature that if you're not paying attention, you'll miss how important it is. Because what I love about it is, okay, Joseph, what's the dream? Well, their sheaves were bound down the mine. Okay, what else? The star, the sun, and the moon. Okay, what does that mean, Joseph? I think it means some sort of authority. When does it occur? I don't know. Didn't give me any details. How does that look? Do you know where it's going to happen? The geography? Do you know the circumstances we're talking about? The context? Nope. All I've got is, is this kind of generalized dream. Okay. Cling to that by faith no matter what you go through. And what you said earlier, so we're the diamond. And I want to be a diamond. I want to have facets. I want to be a unique stone. So how do you get me there, God? Well, pressure. If you really want to be a diamond, it won't occur without extreme pressure. So the chisel and the hammer hurt. But here's the comfort. God's right hand is on the hammer, and God's left hand is holding the chisel. And so every time he cracks the chisel and I am chipped, I feel it, but I don't fuss because I endure hardness as a good soldier, and I know that I am his handiwork. I am his poem at work. So yeah, that's what getting up is about. It's not just getting up, get more money, let me get some new clothes, let me get a promotion. I think those are all components that happen, but they happen just like with Joseph. He's got this internal character. He's got this internal commitment to God. And so Paul tells Timothy, he says, take private pain, discipline yourself privately, and you will have public profit. Whoa. But they'll ask, how did I get it? Yeah, but it's going to be impossible to explain it because it's because of your personal, internal commitment to obey God and to grow. Well, what does obedience look like? Well, I'll give you a good example. If I tell my kids, go downstairs and get that ice cream. Okay, Dad, this is not really complicated. Go wash the dishes, clean your room, and get your homework done. Oh, Dad. Okay. So obedience is manifest when the command crosses your will. And so let's get up. Let's reach. Let's perfect that skill of responding immediately to the voice of God, like Abram. Abram, take your only son and offer him up. And Abraham begins to move. He's seasoned. He's mature. This is a difficult request, but he moves. And when his son asks, Dad, I see the wood. I see the knife. Where's the sacrifice? God will provide. That's mature faith. And he's gotten up from where he was in Genesis chapter 12. He's grown. He's reached. And he's succeeded. And it changes your response time to God and the momentum of your journey in life. And that's what I'm trying to communicate, because he's no respecter of persons.
See, in light of your book, when I read Genesis 22, and I see the faith of Abraham, I have to ask myself the question, who had more faith? Was it Abraham or was it Isaac?
Isaac, because he got up on the altar. How about that?
Because I'm going to walk up this mountain knowing that I'm carrying the wood for my offering, just like my Messiah carried the wood for his offering. I carried the wood for my offering up that hill. And I laid down on that altar, and I let my Father lash me to that altar. Mm-hmm. And I lay there, and I did not say a word. Now, we know how old he was.
Yep. He was a teenager.
He's in his 30s.
Wow. You're saying he was in his 30s?
Wow. Go back and do the math, my friend. He's in his 30s. Okay? Is he the same age as Messiah? We tend to argue about the dates, but he's between 30 and 33 years old. Okay? The amount of wood, all right, that took up 2 donkeys, he was now carrying himself. So he had to be large enough and strong enough. And his father was over 100 years old. Therefore, he could have taken his father out any second he wanted. But he didn't. He obeyed.
He obeyed unto death.
And so here we have the situation where obedience is better than sacrifice.
Yes, it is.
And we see the faith of the Father emulated through the Son. Train up a child in the way they should go, and when they grow older, they will not depart from it. There we see that happen, and we see the faith of Abraham believing that the promise was reminded to him, all right, that God said that this is the promised son. This is the son of the covenant. And so God's a covenant-keeping God. He's going to make provision for his covenants to come to pass. And if that covenant is for your benefit, the same way getting up from being down is God's plan for you. God's plan is not to keep you down.
No.
It's to keep you down long enough for him to be able to rebuild you better, stronger, more equipped. So when you do stand up, you're able to reach high and finish strong. That's the message of this book.
It is, and that's a great point. And I really appreciate what you pointed out, because Isaac, who often is not considered in the text as much as Abraham is, he got up from being down. And humble yourself is a continued phrase. It doesn't say make God humble you. It's a choice to take low. And, you know, I think about Moses when he got his calling. Just like Isaac is a figure that's not often considered in that particular text in Genesis 22, there's another component that's not figured in Exodus 3. We think about Moses at the burning bush. And so one of the things that help people choose to humble themselves is a sense of safety when they take that risk. And at the burning bush, you have the glory of God, and you have Moses. And Moses, take off your shoes, for you're on holy ground. And so you see Moses seeing God, but people don't often factor the sheep in. The sheep are present with the shepherd. And so what they see is they see their shepherd seeing God. And there's this thing God has created so that when the sheep see the shepherd seeing God, there's a safety, a peace, a comfort that allows them to submit to the shepherd. And you made me think about that when you talked about Isaac being 30 years old and submitting to his father like a shepherd and laying his life down, which is exactly what Christ does.
Right. And by the way, he rose up from the altar on the third day.
There you go. There's the metaphor.
And the ram caught in the thicket is a thorn bush, and that ram is wearing a crown of thorns. And all of a sudden we're seeing the picture of our Messiah laid out there. It is the faith of the Son, his only Son. He said, take your son, your only son who you love, all right? And all the things that Jesus did. The path that Jesus walked, he walked. They both left two witnesses behind that didn't see what happened. The two servants at the bottom and the two thieves on the cross. All this is the same story for you and I to understand that God has had a plan in place since creation to provide a path of salvation for Jew and Gentile, for us to become one in Messiah, for all the middle wall of separation and division that ever existed between mankind, between Jew and Gentile, because that's all there is in the world. Okay? Yeah. There's not black and white, there's not orange and yellow and green, there's Jew and Gentile. That's all there is in God's economy. That's all he made was Jew and Gentile. In Ephesians 2, he says, from the two I shall make one new man. And you and I are the living example, the breathing example of we have everything in common. And we come from two different places, two different backgrounds, but we have Messiah that binds us together, and that cord of three strands cannot be broken. And that, my friend, is the message of getting up from being down. That God does not want you to stay down. Right? But if you are down, God wants to lift you up. He says, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He
will exalt you.
He will lift you up.
Yes, He will.
Higher and higher. Stand up, reach high, finish strong. Todd Townsend, getting up from being down. May the Lord bless all the works of your hand. Thank you for being here with us on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Rabbi Walker, for having me. And I must say, I really enjoyed the dialogue.
God bless you, my friend, and May God bless you and your whole family. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.